Okay, this is going to be a review of a few SAT style questions. Very similar to that diagnostic we took earlier in the year. I changed some numbers a bit. So I'm just going to be mostly talking strategy of a few questions. It's going to be one of 4 videos that we're going to get over the next few days where we look at some strategies of solving certain styles of questions. All right, so the first one was this geometry one, and I paraphrased the information from the problem, but basically tell you that we have an isosceles triangle, and we know it's isosceles because they tell us that 2 sides are equal in length, AB and AC. They tell us that BC is 39 units, and they give us a ratio of 2 sides, ED to DF. They said that's 5 to 8. Find CD. All right, so do a quick sketch if you need to. I don't know, in SATs, usually you're not allowed to write in the test booklet, but then there's scrap paper, but you definitely like marking up pictures. So draw a quick sketch if you need to, because marking up your picture is helpful. Anyways, so AB and AC are congruent. What does that mean? Well, it means that this isosceles triangle with these 2 legs congruent are going to have these 2 base angles here are congruent. And then you may notice that these 2 little right triangles have 2 congruent angles. That means by angle, the 2 triangles are similar. So if we have a ratio of ED to DF as 5 to 8, now I'm not saying it's 5 units and 8 units, just the ratio is 5 to 8, then the scale factor from everything triangle B to everything triangle C is 5 to 8. So if this side is 5 to 8, then all sides are 5 to 8. The height is 5 to 8. The perimeters are 5 to 8. All sides would be 5 to 8. And if you know the side lengths from this triangle to this triangle make a ratio of 5 to 8, that's going to be true for all the sides, including BD to DC. So there's going to be some 5 times some variable x and 8 times some variable x. We're not sure what x is, but we know that 5x plus 8x add together to be all of BC. So 13x equals BC, but we also know that BC equals 39. So we can use that fact to solve for our variable x. We would set up the equation 5 times some x, some dimension we don't know, plus 8 times some that same x, that dimension we don't know, must add together to be BC. So the 5x plus 8x must add to be BC. 13x equals 39. Divide by 13, x equals 3. Once we know that, we can substitute x equals 3 back in here and get BD must equal 5 times 3, or 15 units. CD equals 8 times 3, which is 24 units. And just as a little check, I could add those together to get 39. And the question, what is CD? That's going to be 24 units, whatever the units is. But the answers in the practice SAT didn't have units here, so I'm going to try and make it as close to that. So that was very similar to a lot of problems that we've done in the year. This next one is a little trickier. They tell us that x and y is a solution to some equation that they give us, and they ask us what is x divided by y if y does not equal 0. So this question is a little confusing in terms of how it's worded, but once you realize what you're doing, it's not so bad. So xy is a solution. It's just telling you that x and y are 2 numbers. We don't know what those numbers are, but they are two numbers, and they're the answer to this equation. And y doesn't equal 0, because if we're going to divide by y, it's nice to know it's not equal to 0. So basically what they're asking us to do is take this equation and solve for x over y. So we have x over y on one side and all numbers on the other side, and let's see what that equals. So we'll take our equation and we'll first just distribute 5 through both x plus y. And then we can combine some like terms. We can subtract a 5y from both sides. We get 5x equals negative 4y. But we want to get x over y. So what we can do here to get x over y is we can divide both sides by y. We'll just divide by y, and that gives us 5x over y equals negative 4. But we want x over y, so now we can basically divide both sides now by 5. And that gives me x over y equals negative 4 over 5. So the question is awkwardly worded, but they're basically in a question like this asking you to take your expression that's given and get x over y. And what does that equal if you just get x over y? So the key here, distribute, and then using division properties of equality, divide by y to get 5x over y, and then divide by 5 to get just x over y. So just using properties of equality. What am I doing on time? Oh good, I'll hopefully get this done in less than 10 minutes. I want to keep all of these videos short. Alright, the last one from this first little set, it was using a word problem to write a system and then solve that system, and I'll paraphrase the question that I stole the question. I mean, I made my own numbers, but it's from that SAT review assessment we did. Anyways, there's some game, and the game gives you some points. There are two types of questions, easy questions and hard questions. Get 50 points for answering an easy question, 100 points for answering a hard question. If 45 questions are answered and we have a score of 3,500 points, how many hard questions were answered? So what we can do here is we can write a system. We don't actually really need two variables, but I'll get to that in a second. So let's use E for easy and H for hard. And what do they tell us here? Okay, so we get 50 points for an easy question. So 50 points times every easy question we answered, plus 100 points for every hard question, 100 points for every hard question. And we know in total that this particular time around that 3,500 questions, not that many questions, 45 questions, 3,500 points. But we also know this other little fun bit that the number of questions in total, so the number of easy questions, number of hard questions, they add together to equal 45. So it is technically a system, but we don't really have to think of it that way, because we can get the hard questions is just going to be 45 minus the number of easy questions. So we can use the substitution method for this system if we'd like. I also noticed something else here, that we can simplify this equation. Every single one of these coefficients, or the constant at the end, ends in a 0, so we can divide a 10 out of this equation. So 5e plus 10h equals 350. Could even take it one step further and divide a 5 out. In fact, why don't I do that? That'll make my life so much easier. By dividing 5 out. So here's one equation. Here's another equation. And we can use this system. We actually already have opposite coefficients. I can add these two equations together. Negative e. Let me just combine my like terms in such a way so that we have in the same order. So negative e, let's subtract h from both sides. So negative e minus h plus 45 equals 0 minus e minus h equals negative 45. And that is, of course, for our opposite coefficients in e. E minus e is 0. 2h minus h is 1h. And then 75 minus 45 is 35. 25. I can do math. That's the number of hard questions is 25. So let's just check real quick if this makes sense. If we have easy plus hard is 45 questions altogether, 25 were hard. That means 20 were easy, 25 were hard. Let's just check if this makes sense. 50 points for the easy questions. So that's 1,000 points right there. 100 points for the hard questions. So it's 2,500. And oh, good. So good, that makes sense. So it looks like we got 25 hard questions. All right, so we went over 10 minutes by a little bit, but some good logic to keep in mind. It's nice to define variables, but to remind yourself what they mean. Give nice, easy variable names like E for easy, H for hard, things like that. Make algebra work a little bit easier if the variables mean what they represent, or a letter that is part of what they represent, like E for easy. Okay, so don't forget proportionality. Don't get scared if they ask you to just solve for some algebra expression. Just use your properties of equality, and yeah, SATs are hard, but this video is designed for freshmen, so you still have a few years before you are actually taking them. But good strategies and problem-solving strategies go a long way.